And what kind of got you started in wanting to become an IBCLC? I mean, was it the lack of representation in where you live, or just kind of your own breastfeeding journey, or a little bit of both? Or
Definitely a little bit of both. So I am born in Texas, raised in New York. So basically, I'm a New Yorker. So as my husband would say, you are definitely not a Southern sweet belle. I am very vocal. So I say what's on my mind, it comes out, and then it's just like, okay, we deal with it. And that's kind of what happened with my journey. I knew I wanted to breastfeed. I saw my mom breastfeed. And in my mind, it just looked like that's how you be a good mom. You breastfeed your baby. Even though that wasn't, what I learned it to be. In my mind, from watching her breastfeed when I was a preteen, that just always engraved in my mind as, oh, that's such a perfect picture of what motherhood is supposed to be. So I remember being 21, well, 22, pregnant with my first son. And me and my husband were like, oh, we're going to go to all these birthing classes because we were young. We were young parents. We had never been parents before. I haven't even babysat before. So I was here in Louisiana and all of my family is in New York. So, I didn't have that community of, as far as like my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, all these people to lean on. So I went to all the classes, and one thing I noticed was a revolving trend is there were nobody else in the class that looked like me. And at first it didn't bother me. I didn't think anything of it. But then when I was in labor, things were going left. And nobody was listening to me. It was just like, this is just how labor is. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not complaining just to complain, like this really, I really don't feel like everything's okay. And I remember my husband, again, both of us are young, but he had to advocate for me. And when my son was finally delivered, and I wanted to breastfeed, I remember them coming in, and I remember the nurse putting the bottle of formula right on that little tray that needs to be upgraded, by the way. I don't know why that little tray is still there. I remember her putting that on that tray and telling me this is just going to be easier. And I felt so defeated. And I just kept saying, just help me. I don't know I have to bring him to the breast, but I don't like, how do I make this happen? I had just had a C-section. I was feeling horrible. And I just remember telling my husband, like, I want to breastfeed. I want to do breastfeeding. Like, I don't want to use the formula. And it was that's what started. That stuck with me. And every time I had another child, and I needed support, again, there were no one around that represented me, and my background, and that representation wasn't there. So I literally took that time. I was full blown working in the OR, loved the operating room and the sterile processing area. But I took the time to just kind of have a self-reflect moment. I went back to school, and I literally graduated while I was on a C-section table, giving birth to my fourth son, in an emergency C-section. And my husband was there with the phone, like holding it by my ear because it was COVID. So, I hadn't even made plans to go to the graduation because I was pregnant. And I remember he's like, I just hope you hear your name and all of this. And I'm like, I don't hear my name. Did I graduate? So.
wow, that's amazing. It kind of came like full circle because you like decided with your first son, and then you're like giving birth to your other son. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And kind of going back to, yeah, and like going back to the you giving birth to your first son and then just handing you formula, like, is that something now as an IBCLC you hear moms say like they're still dealing with in the hospitals, or do you see any change coming to that process?
To be honest, I see that there is an attempt at change. We've all heard about the baby-friendly policies that are in place, and this bigger push on breastfeeding. We know the, World Health Organization talks about it. The CDC talks about it. Everybody's talking about breastfeeding. But on the ground level of things, I've been there where I purposely did a huge chunk of my clinical internship, in a hospital setting. And I saw that trend. And even though it wasn't outright, oh, we know they're not going to breastfeed, it was more like, we just have it in our pocket just in case. And the amount of time that's spent in that room is not enough. It's not enough to help someone establish breastfeeding. So what I found is it was happening more with younger Black moms that did not have any pre-education, that didn't even know, the components of breastfeeding, that were literally the first time they were hearing breastfeeding was after their child just came out, and they're like, "Do I go and do what?" Um, so I find that yes, it's still happening. I think that there's at least the question is happening now, at least in my area, where people are saying, "Hey, do you want to breastfeed? Or what are your infant feeding, choices? Once this baby comes out." That wasn't happening before. It was just kind of like, okay, so here's this formula, and it's like, oh, did you even ask that mom if she wants to try breastfeeding? Provide some education, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely like what I hear all the time too is yeah, there's no like education. It's like lacking a lot of education. So if you're just handed formula saying like, oh, this is easier, and if you hadn't had that previous knowledge of like, no, I want to breastfeed, I feel like so many moms would be like, oh, okay, the nurse here is telling me it's easier, so I'm just going to do that. It's
Or it's a catch
happens.
22. Sometimes I get they're so aggressive. They're so aggressive. They're gonna force this your boob inside the baby's mouth. They're so aggressive. I don't even want lactation to come in my room. And I'm just like, again, choices. Everybody has a choice in the matter. I want to say, I know the one of like the biggest defining moments, and I knew then that I would never want to work in a hospital setting. I love my hospital mentors, but the type of work that I need to do, I need to be able to do so in the community. Was when I had a mom. She was very, very young. And I remember one of the nurses coming to get me. And she's like, you might be able to just connect with her better because the vibe in the room is just it's not working. We're not clicking. But she says she wants to breastfeed. She has her aunt and her mom in the room, and they're both just telling her to use formula. And, she's like, so it's just a big mess in there. And I didn't catch on at first because, I don't look at the charts to see what's the racial background of my patients. I just, wherever they sent me, I went. I'm just a little intern girl. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's like an age thing. So I went in there, and it was a Black family.